Alex Johnson believed his world had crumbled the day he heard his wife, Emma, had tragically passed away while he was overseas. But something about her death never sat right with him. Upon returning home, he's met with vague explanations, a grieving family that hides their eyes, and a gut feeling that something is terribly wrong. Desperate for closure, Alex makes the unthinkable decision to visit her grave. But as he stares down at the freshly unearthed dirt, a chilling realization grips him. Nothing makes sense. Weeks pass, and Alex sinks deeper into despair, searching for answers that seem forever out of reach. Until one fateful day, in the middle of a busy shopping mall, Alex's life takes a stunning turn. A small child bumps into him, but it's the voice behind him that sends shockwaves through his soul. He turns to see her, Emma, alive, walking toward him. The wife he buried, the woman he mourned, standing before him as if the last 2 years were nothing but a cruel illusion. What happened to Emma? Why did she disappear? And most importantly, what dark secrets lie in the shadows of their past? Friends, this is the kind of story that will make you question whether love can truly go to such extremes. It's the story of a girl who found herself caught between love and hate. My hands were sweating, and I was in a terrible state. Those men were digging a grave right in front of me, and I knew I was about to witness something unexpected. Yet I was scared. I had no idea why I had decided to go through with all of this. My brother kept telling me to go back home, but I couldn't listen to him. After a while, I dug the grave, and what I saw left me stunned. Before I could faint from the shock, something strange happened. As we turned to leave, we heard the cries of a baby coming from inside the grave. My name is Alex Johnson, and I had left the country to support my family. I have 7 sisters, and right after my marriage, I flew out of the country. My wife's name was Emma. I spent only 7 days with her, but she was a wonderful woman. We both knew from the beginning that our time together was short, and I promised her that I would return soon. She believed me, but when we got married, she didn't seem happy. She looked anxious, fearful for the first few days. It wasn't the marriage that frightened her. I was close to my friends, and they convinced me to get married even though my mom was against it. My mom had always said that I shouldn't marry until at least 4 of my sisters were married off. "You're the only breadwinner," she'd say, "and there are 8 of us to feed. What will happen if you get married and refuse to support your sisters?" My mother was a strict woman, and no one in the family wanted to arrange a marriage for me because I had 7 sisters and a tough mother-in-law. People thought, who would marry their daughter into such a household? Nowadays, girls are smart. They'd rather marry into a house without sisters or a difficult mother-in-law. My uncle made great efforts to find me a wife, and eventually, I married Emma. My mother didn't even attend the wedding because she was so angry. After the wedding, I asked my uncle to take care of my wife, knowing my mother was already upset. My mother said, "Why talk to outsiders? We'll take care of her ourselves. She's part of the family now, and we won't throw her onto the streets." After the wedding, I returned to my job. In our household, no one was allowed to own a phone, but before leaving, I secretly gave Emma a phone. I told her, "If anyone asks, don't tell them I gave it to you." She agreed, and I promised I'd call her at night. We talked on the phone regularly, and I told her, "Spend some time with me. I'm your husband, after all." But by the time she started to feel comfortable, it was already time for me to leave. I figured she'd adjust by the time I returned. Little did I know that the news awaiting me would turn my world upside down. My uncle, who had taken my father's place in my life, arranged the wedding. But one day, as I was talking to Emma on the phone, something strange happened. She was speaking normally, but then she started talking to someone else as if someone had walked in. She didn't hang up the phone, though. After a while, I heard odd sounds, and then the call disconnected. When I tried calling again, the phone was turned off. The next morning, my mom called me from our neighbor's house, as we lived in a rural area with poor reception. She said, "This is why I didn't want you to marry. Now I have to keep an eye on your wife while you're away. I already have 7 grown daughters at home." I asked, "Why? What happened? What did my wife do?" My mom replied, "She's been talking to someone on the phone late at night. I've been hearing laughter from her room for the past few nights. I asked her where she got the phone from, but she won't say. In my anger, I slapped her a few times." When I heard this, the ground beneath my feet seemed to disappear. I asked, "Mom, how could you do this? Why did you hit her? The marriage just happened." She replied, "Well, she should understand that she's a newlywed. She's already gotten herself involved with someone." I said, "It's not what you think, Mom." I gave her the phone so we could talk, and I told her not to tell anyone. "She's innocent. She didn't tell you because she was speaking with me, your son." My mom was shocked. She said, "Why didn't you tell me?" "I'll apologize, but you should have explained. I've broken her phone in my anger." I was furious, but couldn't say anything because it was my mom. I stopped calling Emma for 2 weeks. Eventually, when I received my salary, I sent money to her brother and asked him to buy her a new phone. I wanted her to talk only to me. My mom was surprised, saying, "Now that you're married, your tongue has grown 2 feet long." I replied, "Why shouldn't it? I'm the breadwinner of this house, and what I say goes." After that, my mom fell silent, but I could tell she was upset. I didn't try to win her over either. She had always stirred trouble, even with my father. She nagged him until the day he passed away, and now she was still plotting against my in-laws. She didn't even want me to get married in the first place. There was no doubt my mom was a greedy woman. She cared only about her daughters and nothing for anyone else. Despite this, if Emma was managing and doing all the housework, she at least deserved respect. When I later spoke with Emma, she didn't complain at all. She said, "It's no big deal. Mom just misunderstood. Besides, my own mother raised her hand on me when I was younger, so it's okay." When a man gets caught between his wife and his mother, he feels completely helpless. And most of the time, it's the mother who ends up being the bad guy because she can't control herself. No matter what kind of person your wife is, she's your life partner, the one who will be by your side for years to come. Even I began to feel that my mom and sisters were in the wrong. Emma once mentioned that there was a guy, her cousin, who had been trying to get in touch with her. "What if one day he tries to call me?" she said. A few days ago, I got a wrong number, and I was scared it was him. I reassured her, saying, "Honey, when you have a phone, sometimes wrong numbers happen. And even if he does call, so what? You're my wife. Just tell me if anything inappropriate happens." Emma explained, "No, it's nothing like that. It's just that he's a bit obsessed with me. You know how some people get fixated on someone." She was referring to her cousin James, who had been obsessed with her since childhood. Her family had even considered marrying her off to him, but after a car accident, James had suffered some brain damage and lost his sense of reality. He had become mentally unstable. I told her, "There's no need to be afraid of someone like that. Just pray for him. You don't need to feel guilty about almost being engaged to him." She seemed relieved. The days passed, and one day Emma said she needed to tell me something important. I was busy at work, so I asked her to wait until nighttime. That evening, when we finally got a chance to talk, she was acting very shy. I pressed her to share what was on her mind. She finally said, "I have something important to tell you. You're going to be a dad." I was shocked. "What? Seriously?" She smiled and confirmed, "Yes, I just found out today." I couldn't believe it. I was overjoyed but also in disbelief. I had been away from home for only a month and a half, so this news had to be true. I asked her, "Have you told anyone yet, our moms?" She said, "No, I haven't told anyone yet. I wanted to surprise you first." I was over the moon, but I also had a plan in mind. I asked her to keep it a secret for now so we could tell everyone together when I returned next month. She agreed, and she was even more excited knowing I'd be home soon. Now, here's where I made my mistake. I had a habit of sharing everything with my mom, so I called her the next day. I was in a great mood, both because of the baby news and because I had just received a bonus at work. I told my mom, and she was thrilled. She then shared some news of her own, saying, "We've arranged a marriage for your oldest sister, and the family wants the wedding to happen soon." I told her, "Don't worry, we'll get it done. I'll handle everything." She reminded me, "We still need to prepare her dowry." I reassured her that I had enough money to take care of it. My mom was in a good mood, and we started talking openly. I mentioned that I'd be coming home soon but told her not to tell Emma, as I wanted it to be a surprise. I also shared my plan to bring Emma back with me for 2 months. My mom wasn't too happy about that. She said, "If you take her with you, who will help around the house?" I replied, "Mom, we have 7 sisters at home. Surely they can manage without her for a while." She started to backtrack, saying, "Well, it's not like she does all the housework, but we've gotten used to her cooking and we enjoy eating the meals she prepares." I said, "You'll manage for 2 months and then she'll come back. It's not like she's staying there forever." My mom sighed and said, "So, your decision is final then?" I had already made plans to leave earlier than expected, even though I had told Emma I'd return next month. I thought I could bring her with me for a year, even though it would be a bit of a challenge. At least we would be together, and the distance wouldn't strain our relationship. I began packing, excited about the prospect of reuniting with my wife. But in the back of my mind I had this nagging thought. What if Emma starts feeling distant just like my friend's wife did? He once told me, "Man, when a woman's world no longer revolves around her husband, things start to fall apart. She stops caring if I come or go. We don't even have kids because the doctor said she's too stressed out. Her stress burns me out too." He advised me, "Don't let Emma get to that point. You still have time." I resolved to be a better husband, especially with Emma expecting our first child. I knew that bringing her back with me could help reduce her stress. However, my mom had arranged my sister's marriage to a family that was demanding a lot in terms of dowry. They wanted money, gifts, and even a motorcycle. I told my mom, "We can find better matches. These people are clearly in it for the money." But she said, "Your sister really likes the guy, and he's a good match. He's her friend's brother." I replied, "So, it's a love marriage? Then why are we giving such a big dowry? If they're in love, shouldn't they make some sacrifices too?" That's when my mom lost her temper. "She's your older sister, and it's our fault for delaying her marriage. We spent all our money on your education and sending you abroad. Now you're giving me attitude. These people want the wedding soon, so send money so I can prepare the dowry quickly. You were the one saying earlier that with enough money, we could sort everything out." I tried to reason with her. I thought the dowry would be modest, just some basic furniture, but they're asking for cars. Where am I supposed to get that kind of money? My mom grew quiet and later called me at night saying, "Shazia tried to kill herself. She cut her wrist. We barely saved her. And all because you refused to give her a proper dowry. Now the family is threatening to call off the engagement. Do you want your sister to die?" She was crying hysterically. The money I had saved to bring Emma back and spend 2 months with her. I had no choice but to send it all to my mom. I told her, "Fine, prepare the dowry and get her married. I won't be able to attend the wedding." Surprisingly, my mom didn't argue or ask why I wasn't coming. She just accepted it and said, "Okay, I'll use the money." I broke the news to Emma, telling her I'd have to delay my trip for 2 months because of work. I'm sure it broke her heart, but she didn't complain. She simply said, "Whatever you think is best." Her quiet acceptance made me love her even more, but I felt helpless, trapped by my circumstances. Then came the final blow, a global pandemic. The entire world went into lockdown. Travel was banned, and I couldn't return home. Emma's phone was stolen, and I didn't have enough money to send her a new one because our work had stopped too. We were surviving on loans and barely getting by. Back home, my sister got married and moved out, but I was left drowning in debt. It took 4 or 5 months before things slowly returned to normal, and by then Emma was about to give birth. I figured I'd return just in time for the baby's arrival. At least I'll get to see my child and spend some time with my family, I thought. I wanted to surprise them, so I didn't tell anyone I was coming. When I arrived, I walked into the house hoping Emma would be the one to answer the door. But she wasn't there. My mom was doing laundry, and my sisters were in the kitchen cooking. I scanned the room, my heart longing to see Emma's face, to see the surprise and joy in her eyes when she saw me. But she didn't open the door, and I couldn't find her anywhere. She couldn't run into my arms, but the joy I'd see in her eyes when she saw me. Just for that, I would do anything. I had brought her many gifts, and I had even shopped for our baby, knowing that any day now my child would arrive. It had been months since we last spoke. She hadn't called me, and when I asked my mom to pass the phone to her, Mom would say, "She doesn't want to talk." I knew she was upset, but I thought I'd make it right when I arrived. That's why I didn't push for phone calls, believing that when I stood in front of her and said, "Are you mad at me, my queen?" she would forgive me like she always did. I had even brought a beautiful gold necklace for her, something she'd love. The gold from the place I worked was famous, and this necklace was meant to be her surprise, a gift that I hadn't shown to anyone. I knew if my mom saw it, she'd suggest keeping it for my sister's wedding, but this was meant for my wife. I had hidden it well. In my mind, I was already making plans for the days ahead. I'd take Emma out frequently, and when our baby arrived, it would be the happiest day of my life. When I got home, my mom was overjoyed to see me. She ushered me inside and told my sister to prepare my favorite meal. It was still early in the day, about 10 a.m., and there was time before lunch. All my sisters were excited, asking what gifts I'd brought for them. I had brought plenty, but I told them to let me settle in first. I was waiting for my mom to say, "Go call Emma, tell her Alex is home," but she didn't say anything. Growing impatient, I finally asked, "Where is Emma?" The room went silent, and my family exchanged nervous glances as if they were waiting for someone to speak. I could sense that something was wrong. I stood up and said, "I'll go to my room. She's probably there." But before I could move, my mom stood in front of me and suddenly started crying uncontrollably as if on cue. "Mom, what's wrong? Why are you crying like this? What happened?" I asked, worried. Through her sobs, she said, "Your wife, Emma." I interrupted, "What about Emma? What happened to her?" Then my mom broke the news. "She's no longer with us. She passed away." I stood there in disbelief. "What do you mean? What kind of joke is this?" "It's not a joke," she said, still crying. "It happened during the pandemic. She was hanging clothes on the rooftop and fell. We didn't tell you because you couldn't have come home anyway, and we didn't want you to suffer alone over there. We decided to wait until you came back." I refused to believe it. I stormed into my room calling out Emma's name, but the room was empty. There was no trace of her. No scent, no belongings. The absence of her presence was suffocating. I screamed, "But she was pregnant, my child." My mom nodded sadly and said, "Yes, we found out later, but we didn't know whose child it was." "It was my child," I yelled. "I knew she was pregnant." My mom looked at me shocked, but I didn't wait for her response. I bolted out of the house, running to Emma's parents' place, hoping this was all some cruel trick. Maybe she had gone back to her parents in anger. But when I got there, her parents refused to see me. Her younger brother told me, "We were told by your family that Emma had passed away. They buried her without even letting us see her one last time." They shoved me out of the house, refusing to answer any more questions. My world had collapsed, and I hadn't even realized it. The gifts I had brought, the gold necklace, the baby clothes, it was all pointless now. Emma was gone. I fainted on the spot, and when I finally woke up 3 days later, I was consumed by grief. I demanded to visit her grave, but my mom tried to stop me. Eventually, she gave in, and we went. When I saw her grave, I clung to it, crying uncontrollably. How could this have happened? What had I done to deserve this? The only memories I had left were of those 7 days we spent together after our wedding and our brief conversations over the phone. I had no idea this would be all I had left of her. I asked my mom how long it had been since Emma passed. She told me it had been almost 3 months. I confided in my closest friend, telling him everything. He was shocked and tried to comfort me, but it wasn't enough. One night, I called him again and told him my plan. He was horrified and tried to talk me out of it. "Don't do this," he said. "I'm telling you, it's not right." But I was determined. I told him, "I have to do this. I need to see her one last time." He reluctantly agreed to help me. That night, we paid off the gravedigger, instructing him to keep quiet. He was a poor man and accepted the money without question. Under the cover of darkness, we began to dig up my wife's grave. I was her husband, and it was my right to do what I was doing. If anyone saw us, I could explain that we were retrieving a body we had temporarily buried. As the grave was being dug, my heart pounded. My friend kept reassuring me, saying, "I'm here with you." But as soon as the grave was fully opened, we both froze in shock. The grave was empty. I fell to my knees, overwhelmed. In that moment, a glimmer of hope surged in my heart. Maybe my family had lied. Maybe Emma wasn't dead. Maybe they had thrown her out of the house and she was still alive somewhere. I turned to my friend and said, "This means she's alive. My mom must have done something to her, kicked her out, or maybe she ran away. But she's not dead." I was crying tears of joy, convinced that my wife was alive. My friend, still trying to process it all, said, "Yeah, maybe that's possible. But we have to get to the bottom of this. We can't ask your family. They'll just lie. We need to talk to someone else." Emma's family had also said that they weren't allowed to see her one last time. They were just informed after she was buried. And on my side, my family hadn't told me anything either. No matter how bad things were between my wife and my family, I couldn't believe that my mother, as harsh as she was, would keep something like this from me. It felt like a cruel joke. I had come home and my wife was gone, just like that. Could it be possible that she had left and they lied to me about her death? But what about the unbearable pain I had gone through for months? Now the grave was empty. Where was she? Her family didn't know either. I didn't tell anyone about what I had discovered. I closed the grave, back up and returned to the house, desperate to find some clue in my room. Maybe she had left something behind for me, some note, some sign. But my mother and sisters wouldn't even meet my eyes. They seemed to be avoiding me. Not long after, my eldest sister came home in tears. She had just been divorced. Chaos erupted in the house as my mother frantically asked, "What happened? Why did he divorce you?" My sister sobbed. "He married someone else and threw me out." I knew right then that this was karma. My mother was paying for her sins, and the biggest sin she had committed was against Emma. I was certain that my wife had suffered because of my mother. But where was she? How could I find her? I searched the house, looking for anything that could explain what had happened. I found her phone, despite my family claiming it had been stolen. This only fueled my suspicion that they had lied to me. But why would Emma leave and not contact her parents? If she had left our house, she should have gone to her family, but they hadn't seen her either. Days turned into weeks, and I continued to search for her, praying every day. I promised God that if I found Emma, I would feed the hungry, build a mosque, and do everything I could to help others. I made countless vows, desperate to see her again, but she remained lost. 2 years passed. One day, I was in a shopping mall when a small child, about 2 or 3 years old, ran toward me. If I hadn't caught him, he might have fallen. I gently told him, "Be careful, son." Suddenly, I heard a woman's voice from behind calling out, "Michael, come here. Where did you go?" The moment I heard that voice, my heart sank. I turned around and saw her, Emma. She was alive. Without thinking, I rushed toward her, crying, "Where did you go? I searched for you everywhere." She stepped back, trying to avoid me. It wasn't just someone who looked like Emma. It was her. People around us began staring, and a man approached, calling her Bella. That's when I knew for sure. This was Emma, but now she was with someone else. Before security could step in and accuse me of harassing her, the man, who I realized was James, said, "Why don't you come with us?" I got into their car, unable to believe what was happening. Emma had once told me James was mentally unstable, but here he was, calm and composed. It didn't make sense. Why was my wife with him? Why did she act like I was a stranger to her? I grabbed his collar and demanded, "Who are you? And what have you done to my wife?" He calmly replied, "I'm the one who saved your wife's life. If it weren't for me, neither she nor your child would be alive today." I let go, stunned. He continued, "I'm James, the one who always wanted to marry her. After you left, she had a terrible accident, and no one from your family cared for her. I found her, took care of her, and helped her recover. We've been together ever since." I was speechless as he showed me pictures of their life together, texts, and even wedding photos. The child was mine, but Emma had been too overwhelmed to understand what had happened to her. Slowly, over time, she realized the truth, that she was married to me and had been through a terrible ordeal. I rented a small apartment and brought her and our child there. Holding my son for the first time was a moment of indescribable joy. He recognized me right away and didn't cry when I held him. I was grateful to James for saving their lives, even though it meant my world had been turned upside down. For 2 months now, I haven't spoken to my family. My mother doesn't know where I am, and she has been searching for me, but this is her punishment. I won't confront her or ask her what she did. Instead, I'll live my life quietly with Emma and my son, building the life we never got to have. James still visits us sometimes. After everything he did for us, I can't forget the debt I owe him. You've probably heard stories like this before, about mothers and sisters driving away daughters-in-law so they can control the son's earnings. My family was no different. But Emma was innocent in all this. Now, I'm starting over with my wife. We're like strangers getting to know each other again. But God has been kind to us. I feel like the luckiest man alive.